Yeah.
Alright, so my name is Michael Raskin, and today I'm going to be refuting Blanca's speech that claims cutting funds for art programs will negatively affect school programs. Blanca gave her speech basically supporting her claim with three claims, saying that the first, cutting art programs will decrease students' academic performance. Second, will increase vandalism and violence in schools. And third, that decreasing or cutting of art programs will decrease schools' economy or funding. Blanca's first claim, stating that academic performance is enhanced when students are in art classes. She doesn't explain how art classes actually enhance students' performance in standardized testing subjects such as math, English, writing, and so on. She also talked about the College Board when she supported her claim, but she doesn't actually provide a connection between how art programs actually directly affected or enhanced the students' performances in these classes compared to kids who were not exposed to students that were not in art classes. In the article called Arts and Smarts and Test Scores and Cognitive Development, Lois Hetland and Ellen Winter, both professors of Harvard University, conducted and concluded as research that there was no correlation proving that art classes directly affected and enhanced students' performance in standardized testing subjects such as math, English, and writing just by being exposed to art programs. It seems to me like her claim had no research to have backing proof to prove it true, so it seems to me like she felt that art was beneficial, which it may have been, but there was not any true fact to prove this. Her second claim was presented that cutting art programs will increase violence and vandalism in schools. She mentioned one school, but she didn't actually specify which school it was, except for the fact that it was an elementary school, and how that getting rid of security and adding in art programs actually decrease this violence and vandalism. This is a little problematic for me. Reason being is vandalism could be anything from actually graffiti, destroying school property, and violence would be anything from bullying to actually hurting other kids. To me, an art program, whether it's a pottery class or an actual drawing class, doesn't seem like this would be effective way to actually get rid of these problems. Students who commit such acts need some kind of sort of mentoring. Again, it's not something that a drama class would actually provide, rather than just take their time and thoughts away for that half hour. Studies have shown that by having teachers and security patrol school grounds, as well as setting up gates and blocking off access to school property, those have been effective methods of vandalism prevention, and showing that art programs have no correlation to successfully preventing these acts of violence and vandalism. Third, Blanca mentioned that schools will lose funding if they cut out art programs. This is definitely a misleading point for me. Reason being is because she didn't actually talk about how schools get funding. The way that the budget cuts work, I'm sorry. Okay, so they don't understand. She didn't explain how they lose funding, and that standardized test subjects actually do get funded in a different method rather than by personal or private methods, which she actually mentioned in her speech. Schools in California, as stated in How Do California Schools and Get Money and Spend Their Money, get their funding from essential classes and needs, such as transportation, food, supplies, solely based on the state's budget, along with partial, very actually small part of taxes that's collected by each county and then dispersed to schools as well. The issue of having art programs be cut from the school's educational system does not directly affect the school's funding. It's actually a completely different way. So basically, if a school gets a certain amount of money, they will put it towards standardized test subjects such as math, English, and writing, and then whatever money they do still have left after, of course, spending on transportation, like school buses, nutrition, for their lunch programs, snacks, and stuff like that, then they will use that extra money for art programs. But even if they didn't have those art classes, it wouldn't necessarily affect how the schools actually get funded. Even if private parties stopped funding the schools, it would still not matter because the schools will still get the same amount of money based on the state budget and, again, partial county tax support. So again, just to kind of recap, art classes did not show a direct correlation for how positively affecting students' academic outcomes. Next, art classes are not a source of stopping vandalism and violence in school environments. And last, the budget cuts are not based off of whether schools do or do not have an art program in their curriculum. Thank you.
All right, Michael, you directly state the advocate's claim and secondary issues, so structurally everything is easy to follow. On the first point, you raised some questions about the advocate's reasoning, but they are just questions. You kind of wonder how these things are related, or you suggest that there's no explanation in the relationship that the advocate presented. Those are okay things to bring up. However, I think you do want to make a declarative statement at some point, and that is that we can't reach the conclusion that this is making a difference. It's not legitimate to make the inference based on the evidence that the advocate presented that in fact scores are going to be better because people had access to art. Then you did cite a source on this, and I appreciated that because I thought the research was the one piece of information that contrasted to the advocate's point very clearly on this. You do this a little bit backwards, so you cite the evidence first, tell us what it says, and then you kind of explain what that means. Give us the claim first. Your claim is, it's pretty simple, that art funding or access to arts does not have any relationship to performance in other subjects. Here's the study that comes from these two researchers that reaches this conclusion. When you just present the evidence, in essence, we're having to make the inference as to what the claim is there. You want to tell us what your claim is, so then we can evaluate whether or not the evidence supports that claim, instead of just reading the evidence and then hoping that we'll make the inference that is the same that you're making there. So you want to be a little bit more direct about that. I did think after you did that, though, that you did a nice job kind of contrasting your position. Said, look, I basically have provided you with evidence on this particular point. The advocate made assertions, presented information that was not clearly explained, and doesn't tell you why they reached those particular conclusions. If you were going to be choosing between those two options, my position is the one that's the valid one. I mean, you didn't quite say it that way, but that's essentially what you came down to. The transitions between the secondary points was very clear. You did the same sort of thing on the second point. You cite the advocate's argument. You raise some questions about it. I think you have a legitimate challenge here as to whether or not security would be affected, the improvement of the schools would be affected by the presence of art. I mean, just asking the question, I think, though, is, we're back to the same situation. It's a question. Then you make reference to research that is not cited in your presentation that says that security issues are improved by by having metal detectors or additional security personnel or locking the gates, all those kinds of things. And although that seems intuitively true to me, it's an assertion on your part. There's no source citation for this evidence, and so I'm not sure that I can contrast your data to the advocate's data any more effectively as a consequence. I tend to believe what you're saying more because it seems intuitive to me, but it would be so much better if you went ahead and provided us with the evidence there. It sounds like you've got some information that you were researching, but you don't present it in the argument. And then the last point basically is just a challenge on how schools are funded. Basically, your argument seems to suggest that funding is unrelated to whether or not they have an arts program. That's what it comes down to. Say it that way. Okay. Because you're back to explaining what her whole argument was, asking some questions about it, but tell us what your argument is, which is that school funding is not affected by whether or not they have an arts program. Because the money comes from the state and it comes from the counties. It's automatically budgeted, and they don't say you have no art program so you get less. Nobody's making the decision that way. That's the claim that you actually have there. All right, thank you.